Greetings, class. Welcome to the palace without rival, as King Sennacherib of Assyria called it. Just an amazing sight in the ancient Assyrian city of Nineveh. We're here a bit after Jonah's time, so we're not going to talk about Jonah. Sennacherib functioned as emperor towards the end of the 8th century, beginning of the 7th century B.C.E. So he was a contemporary of prophets later than the historical Jonah. Prophets like Micah, like Isaiah, and so forth. And indeed, a lot of what we'll see here in this palace at Nineveh will help us to understand prophets of the 9th and 8th centuries. Now, the fact that we're in an Assyrian palace may cause some confusion because in an earlier virtual time travel, I met you at the palace at Kala, ancient Akkadian Kalhu, also known as Nimrud. That site is a bit south of here, still on the Tigris River, but a bit south, a bit further away from where we are now. This is a later palace, and Nineveh is an amazing site compared to Kalhu. Kalhu is interesting because that's where our seminary VTS Assyrian relief came from, but the reliefs here in the Palace Without Rival of Sennacherib are amazing. He lined his palace with beautiful reliefs stretching, if you measure their layout, almost 2 miles long. The site of Nineveh is also famous for a lot of his other building projects, including bringing in water from the mountains, creating aqueduct systems almost 50 miles long to water beautiful gardens in the city of Nineveh. And recently, some scholars have thought that these are the famous hanging gardens of antiquity, right here in Nineveh, rather than in Babylon, as lore has had it in the past. Be that as it may, Nineveh was surely a beautiful garden-like utopia that Sennacherib attempted to make. Now, as we go behind here in to see some of the reliefs, we'll be looking particularly at the reliefs that depict Sennacherib's siege, destruction, capture of the Judean city of Lachish, a satellite fortress of Jerusalem. This happened around the year 701 B.C.E., and we'll return to it later when we dive into the prophet Isaiah, because this was a pivotal moment when Sennacherib came in at 701 and challenged Isaiah's prophecies of the inviolability, the permanent commitment of God to Jerusalem. And we'll see how Hezekiah dealt with both the Assyrian threat and with the prophecies of Isaiah. But for now, I want to also look at the reliefs as they illumine other prophetic texts, other prophetic poetry, prophecies, for example, in Micah and in Jeremiah, as well as in Isaiah, and even take a little bit of a look at some of the descriptions of an earlier age, back in the 9th century, at the time of Elisha, when the Syrians, the Arameans, a nearer empire than Assyria, besieged the northern capital of Samaria. These reliefs are close enough in time even to Elisha's era in the 9th century that it can illumine some of the things that happened then. So let me stop talking. Let's get into the palace displays of these beautiful Lachish reliefs of Sennacherib. They're currently in the British Museum, so you can go see them there. But for now, we are virtually in the virtual palace of Sennacherib, the palace without rival at Nineveh. Enjoy your visit. Sennacherib of Assyria celebrated his defeat and looting of the Judean city of Lachish with over 60 linear feet of wall reliefs. Lachish had been well fortified because of its strategic importance, including a double gate structure, as well as walls over 12 feet thick. In Micah chapter 1, the prophet warns of the destruction of this satellite fortress of Jerusalem and of all towns lying along the route of the Assyrian approach to the capital. In verse 13, Micah's poetry puns on how Lachish sounds like Chariotville. All you who live in Chariotville, get in your chariots and get ready for flight. You led daughter Zion into trusting not God, but chariots. Siege warfare, which subjected the entirety of society to attack, was a dreadful, horrifying threat that the Israelites faced throughout their national history. You can see in the reliefs the sort of siege ramps that the prophet Jeremiah, for one, prophesies will be laid up against the Israelites and their cities. Jeremiah 6:6. For thus says the Lord of hosts, cut down her trees, cast up a siege ramp against Jerusalem. This is the city that must be punished. There is nothing but oppression within her. People faced starvation during a siege, as is clear from the description of the siege of Samaria during Elisha's time. 2 Kings 6:25. Look at the emaciated state of these animals in the relief who have survived a siege. These reliefs are so illuminating, we will surely return to them later in the course. But a final detail to notice for now is the pride Sennacherib takes as he sits on his throne and reviews all of the captured spoil and the emaciated prisoners of war. The irony is that Sennacherib had to celebrate his capture of Lachish because he couldn't celebrate the capture of Jerusalem, which never happened. Isaiah, relying on Zion theology, had prophesied the security of Jerusalem, and in fact, these reliefs bear indirect testimony to that success and victory of Zion theology.